October 4th, 1971. A brown-haired woman with a crystalline voice walks into RCA Studio B in Nashville. She's 25 years old, the fourth of 12 children born in a one-room cabin in the Smoky Mountains. For years, she's been known as Porter Wagoner's girl, the pretty blonde who harmonizes on his television show. But today she's releasing something different, her 8th solo album. And on its cover is a painting of a little girl wearing a patchwork coat made from scraps, rags donated to a family too poor to buy winter clothes. The title is simple, borrowed from the Bible, Coat of Many Colors. The album will peak at number 7 on the country charts. The title track will reach number 4. Critics will call it her starkest, most affecting work. Time magazine will eventually name it one of the 100 greatest albums of all time. The Library of Congress will add the title song to the National Recording Registry. But behind those accolades lies a story that Dolly Parton kept silent for years. A story of childhood humiliation so painful, she couldn't speak about it. A story of a mother's love sewn into every stitch. A story that would define not just an album, but an entire philosophy of turning pain into pride. This is the story of how one coat made from rags became the most personal statement in country music history. How poverty became poetry. How a bullied child became a storyteller who taught the world that wealth has nothing to do with money. Welcome to the Sound Vault. Every album has a story. This is Dolly Parton's. To understand Coat of Many Colors, you have to understand where Dolly Parton came from. January 19, 1946, Locust Ridge, Tennessee. Nestled in the Great Smoky Mountains, northeast of Gatlinburg, southeast of Sevierville. So remote it barely appeared on maps. So poor that 60% of families in Sevier County lived below the poverty line. A.V. Lee Owens Parton gave birth to her 4th child, a daughter, in a one-room cabin with no electricity, no running water, no insulation. The cabin had a few rooms total. The children shared beds. Sometimes they went hungry. Robert Lee Parton, Dolly's father, was a tobacco farmer and construction worker who couldn't read or write. He'd save portions of his lunch to share with his children later that night. They called it Daddy's Dinner Bucket. By the time A.V. Lee was 35, she had given birth to 12 children. All of them lived in that tiny cabin, making do with what they had. Dolly would later describe it simply. I grew up poor, very poor. But there was music. Always music. Her grandfather was a Pentecostal preacher. The family sang together, gospel songs, folk songs, mountain melodies passed down through generations. Even as a child with patches on her clothes and holes in her shoes, Dolly had a voice that stopped people in their tracks. By age 5, she was composing songs. By age 7, she was playing guitar and performing at church and local fairs. By age 10, she was singing on Knoxville radio and television. By age 13, she had recorded her first singles. The music was an escape, a way out, a dream bigger than the mountains that surrounded her. But before she could become Dolly Parton the superstar, she had to survive being Dolly Parton the poor girl. And that survival would require a coat. Winter was coming. Little Dolly needed a coat. But the Parton family had no money for a new one. Winters in the Smoky Mountains were harsh, cold winds whipping through those hills, temperatures dropping below freezing. A child couldn't go to school without something warm. Then someone gave the family a box. Inside were fabric scraps, rags, pieces of cloth too small to be useful on their own, in colors that didn't match, bright, mismatched, discarded. Dolly's mother, A.V. Lee, was a quilter and seamstress. She looked at those rags and saw possibility. She spread them across the floor of that tiny cabin and began to piece them together, working late into the night, her needle moving through fabric with purpose and love. As she sewed, she told her daughter a story, a Bible story. The story of Joseph, Jacob's favorite son, the one who received a special gift from his father, a coat of many colors. A coat that made Joseph's brothers jealous, but a coat that symbolized how precious and loved Joseph was. Dolly would later recall in her 1994 autobiography, "My mama made that coat for me out of the brightest, most different colors she could find. This was going to be a coat like nobody had ever seen." The little girl was electric with excitement. She wore it around the house before it was even finished, admiring herself in it, strutting about until her siblings got sick of her showing off. That night, she could barely sleep. It was worse than Christmas Eve. The next morning, Dolly put on her new coat, the patches still on her breeches, the holes still in both her shoes, and hurried off to school, proud to show everyone her mother's creation. What happened next would haunt her for years. "It looks like a bunch of rags," one boy's words. Then laughter, pointing, jeering. The other children circled around her, mocking the coat her mother had made with such love and care. Dolly's heart sank. She tried to explain. She told them about the love her mama sewed into every stitch. She told them the Bible story her mother had shared while sewing. She told them that even though they had no money, she was rich in the things that mattered. But the children didn't understand. Years later, Dolly would reveal an even darker detail. The other children stripped the coat off of her and locked her, half naked and screaming, in a dark coat closet. The trauma was so severe that to this day, Dolly Parton sleeps with a light on. "My heart sank," she wrote. "Soon it turned into a whole room full of mocking faces, laughing, pointing, jeering at me and my coat." For years, Dolly carried that shame in silence. She was too humiliated to talk about what had happened. The coat that was supposed to make her feel special had become a symbol of everything that made her different, everything that marked her as poor, everything that separated her from the other children. But Dolly Parton had taught her daughter something profound while sewing that coat. She'd taught her that one is only poor if they choose to be. That real wealth isn't measured in dollars. That love and family and faith are riches beyond measure. It would take years for Dolly to understand that lesson. But when she did, it would change everything. Dolly Parton left Locust Ridge the day after she graduated high school in 1964. She was 18 years old, carrying a guitar and a cardboard suitcase, heading to Nashville with dreams of becoming a songwriter. The early years were a struggle. She worked odd jobs. She wrote songs constantly. She recorded with small labels. She tried to fit into the bubblegum pop mold that record executives wanted, but it never felt right. Her break came in 1967 when Porter Wagoner, a country music star known for his flashy nudie suits and popular television variety show, heard her song Dumb Blonde and invited her to replace Norma Jean on the Porter Wagoner show. At first, audiences didn't warm to her. She wasn't Norma Jean. But Wagoner believed in her talent, and gradually she won them over. Their duets became hits. They won the Country Music Association's Vocal Group of the Year award in 1968. But the relationship was complicated. Wagoner was possessive, controlling. He made career decisions for her. He was protective of her image to an obsessive degree. During an appearance on The Tonight Show in 1970, he fielded every question, not allowing Dolly to speak for herself. "Porter and I fought like cats and dogs," Dolly later said. "We collided all the time because we were both very strong-willed, very confident people. Still, the partnership was professionally fruitful." Dolly released albums steadily. "Just the Two of Us," "My Tennessee Mountain Home," "Joshua." She was establishing herself as a songwriter of remarkable depth, penning songs about poverty, hardship, faith, and resilience. But she still hadn't recorded the song that would define her career. The song she'd written 2 years earlier, in 1969, on a tour bus. The year was 1969. Dolly was traveling with Porter Wagoner on his tour bus. Wagoner was known for his elaborate stage clothes, rhinestone-covered nudie suits that cost thousands of dollars, flashy outfits that announced wealth and success. And that's when it hit her. The memory, the coat, the humiliation, the lesson. The contrast couldn't have been starker. She was riding on a bus with a man who spent fortunes on clothing, remembering a time when her mother had to make a coat from donated rags. But instead of shame, she felt something else. Pride, gratitude, understanding. The song came pouring out of her, but she had no paper to write it down. She grabbed the first thing she found, a dry cleaning receipt from one of Porter's expensive suits. The irony was perfect. And on the back of that receipt, she wrote the words that would become her signature song. "Back through the years, I go wandering once again. Back to the seasons of my youth." She wrote about the box of rags, about her mother sewing with love, about the Bible story of Joseph, about going to school so proud, about the laughter and mockery, about trying to make the other children understand that wealth isn't measured in clothes or money. But they didn't understand it, and I tried to make them see one is only poor, only if they choose to be. When she finished, she showed it to Porter Wagoner. He was moved by it, recognized its power immediately. In fact, he recorded it himself first in 1969, with Dolly singing backup vocals. But Wagoner knew the truth. This song belonged to the little girl who had lived it. Only Dolly could sing it the way it needed to be sung. Yet when he encouraged her to record it, Dolly hesitated. The memory was still too painful. She'd spent years trying to forget that humiliation, building a new identity as a performer, escaping the poverty of Locust Ridge. Did she really want to go back? Did she want to open that wound again? April 16 and 27, 1971. RCA Studio B, Nashville, Tennessee. The studio was legendary, the birthplace of the Nashville sound. In that single-story building at 1611 Hawkins Street, later renamed Roy Acuff Place, Elvis Presley had recorded Heartbreak Hotel. Chet Atkins had crafted countless classics, and hundreds of country music's greatest songs had been born. The studio itself was modest, just 40 feet by 26 feet, with a 13-foot ceiling. A grand piano from NBC's Tonight Show sat in the corner. The control room was tiny, only 12 feet deep. But the sound that came out of that studio was magic. Bob Ferguson was producing. Ferguson was a Nashville institution, a Marine veteran who'd helped create the Nashville sound of the 1950s and 60s. From 1963 to 1978, he produced hundreds of records for RCA, working with Porter Wagoner, Connie Smith, and dozens of other country artists. For Dolly, Ferguson had produced nearly every album since she signed with RCA in 1967. He understood her voice, her vision, her sensibility. The sessions for Coat of Many Colors were relatively quick. Some tracks had been recorded during previous sessions for other albums. She Never Met a Man She Didn't Like and A Better Place to Live had been recorded back in October 1969, while Early Morning Breeze came from a January 1971 session for her Joshua album, but the title track was recorded fresh in April 1971. Dolly's voice on that recording is remarkable, pure, unadorned, almost childlike in its innocence. There's no vocal trickery, no production flourishes, just Dolly, her guitar, and a simple arrangement that lets the story breathe. The instrumentation is sparse: acoustic guitar, bass, drums, a touch of organ that gives the song an almost hymn-like quality. Billy Sanford, Dave Kirby, Jerry Shook, and George McCormick on guitars, Bobby Dyson on bass, Jerry Kerrigan on drums, Pete Drake on pedal steel. They understood what the song needed to get out of the way and let Dolly tell her story. When she sang the final verse, the one about how she tried to make the other children see that poverty is a choice, that she was rich in her coat of many colors, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. Coat of Many Colors was Dolly's 8th solo album, but it felt different from everything that came before. Of the 10 songs on the album, Dolly wrote 7 herself. The other 3 were contributions from Porter Wagoner, but even Wagoner's songs fit the album's themes, stories of love, loss, faith, and resilience. Traveling Man was a classic Dolly twist-in-the-tail song about a wild young woman who falls for a traveling salesman, much to her mother's disgust. By the end, the mother steals the man and rides out of town. My Blue Tears was an old-timey folk-influenced ballad that Dolly would later re-record with Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt. If I Lose My Mind, written by Wagoner, was a powerful song about leaving a toxic relationship. Early Morning Breeze was a gentle meditation on faith and gratitude, with Dolly describing the landscape of her Tennessee home as a sacred space for prayer. Here I Am was a joyful declaration of presence and purpose, a song that announced Dolly Parton was stepping fully into her own identity. The album cover featured a painted version of a school photo of Dolly wearing the coat, taken the same day she was teased about it. In the photo, you can see her trying to smile despite her tears. The album was released on October 4, 1971 on LP and 80-track. The first single, My Blue Tears, had been released in June and peaked at number 17 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. But it was the title track, released in September, that would define the album's legacy. October 16, 1971. Billboard magazine published their review. The top stylist's new single, the touching ballad Coat of Many Colors, kicks off what should prove to be her biggest-selling album to date. They were right. Coat of Many Colors entered the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart at number 65 on October 30, 1971. By December 25, Christmas Day, it had peaked at number 4. It would chart for 16 weeks total. The album debuted at number 41 on the Billboard Top Country Albums chart and climbed steadily, peaking at number 7 on January 22, 1972, where it remained for 23 weeks. Critics were unanimous in their praise. Cashbox wrote, "It's hard to believe it's possible, but Dolly's releases still get better and better each time you listen, and each time a new one hits the market." Robert Christgau would later write in his 1981 record guide, beginning with 2 absolutely classic songs, one about a mother's love and the next about a mother's sexuality. Side 1 is genius of a purity you never encounter in rock anymore. Stephen Thomas Erlewine of AllMusic gave the album 5 stars, writing that it announced Parton as a major talent in her own right, not merely a duet partner. But the most important validation came from somewhere else. The people who had lived similar stories. Letters poured in from listeners who had endured poverty, bullying, and shame. From people who understood what it meant to be mocked for being different. From mothers who had sewn clothes for their children out of scraps. Dolly had given voice to an experience that millions had lived but few had articulated so beautifully. Coat of Many Colors wasn't just a song, it was a worldview. The album was nominated for Album of the Year at the 1972 Country Music Association Awards, Dolly's first such nomination. But more importantly, it established Dolly Parton as a songwriter-philosopher, someone who could transform personal pain into universal truth. The core message was radical in its simplicity. One is only poor if they choose to be. This wasn't about denying material poverty. Dolly never sugarcoated the hardships of growing up with nothing. It was about refusing to let poverty define your worth, your dignity, your sense of richness. The Parton family had no money, but they had love. They had music. They had faith. They had each other. And in Dolly's childhood understanding, reinforced by her mother's Bible story, that made them wealthy beyond measure. It was a philosophy that would guide Dolly for the rest of her life. Years later, after becoming one of the most successful entertainers in the world, she would use her wealth to give back, creating the Imagination Library to provide free books to children, funding scholarships, supporting her home community in countless ways. But she never forgot where she came from, never pretended to be someone she wasn't, never felt shame about Locust Ridge. Coat of Many Colors had healed something in her. Writing the song, recording it, releasing it into the world, it had transformed her relationship with her own past. The success of Coat of Many Colors marked a turning point in Dolly's career. She was no longer just the girl on Porter Wagoner's show. She was Dolly Parton, songwriter and artist in her own right. But that success created tension. Porter Wagoner had given her the break that launched her career. He'd championed her talent when others doubted. But he also wanted to control her career trajectory, and Dolly was increasingly determined to go her own way. The fights grew more frequent and more intense. They were both stubborn, strong-willed people with definite ideas about what was best. By 1974, Dolly had made her decision. She needed to leave the show and strike out on her own. The split wasn't easy. On February 19, 1974, Dolly announced she was ending their 7-year partnership. Wagoner felt betrayed. His star was leaving just as she was reaching new heights. Dolly did what she did best. She wrote a song about it. She walked into Porter's office and told him to sit down. Then she played him "I Will Always Love You." It was her way of saying goodbye, acknowledging everything he'd done for her, expressing her gratitude but also making clear she had to go. Porter started crying. "That's the prettiest song I ever heard," he said. "And you can go, providing I get to produce that record." Dolly agreed. The song went to #1 on the country charts. Years later, Whitney Houston would record a cover for the Bodyguard soundtrack that would become one of the biggest hits in history, earning Dolly millions in royalties and introducing the song to a new generation. The split was bitter in some ways. Wagoner later sued Dolly in 1979 for breach of contract, asking for $3 million. They eventually settled and even recorded another album together, but they didn't truly reconcile until the late 1980s. When Porter Wagoner died in 2007, Dolly was by his side. She performed a concert in his memory at Dollywood. And that dry cleaning receipt with the lyrics to Coat of Many Colors, the one Porter had framed when the song became a hit, still hangs in the Chasing Rainbows Museum. In the decades since its release, Coat of Many Colors has taken on a life far beyond a single or an album. In 1996, Dolly turned the song into a children's picture book with illustrations by Judith Sutton. It became a tool for teaching children about bullying, empathy, and resilience. In 2003, Shania Twain recorded a cover version with Alison Krauss and Union Station for a Dolly Parton tribute album titled Just Because I'm a Woman, Songs of Dolly Parton. In 2006, Time magazine included the album on its list of the 100 greatest albums of all time. In 2011, the Library of Congress added the song to the National Recording Registry, recognizing it as culturally, historically, or aesthetically important. In 2015, NBC aired a made-for-television movie based on the song Dolly Parton's Coat of Many Colors, with Olivia Allen Lind as young Dolly and Jennifer Nettles as her mother. It was so successful that a sequel, Christmas of Many Colors, Circle of Love, aired in 2016. In 2019, the song was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. In 2020, Rolling Stone ranked the album at number 257 on their list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, calling it Dolly's starkest, most affecting album. In 2022, Brandi Carlile and Pink performed the song together during Dolly's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But perhaps the most important legacy is harder to quantify. It's in the countless people who have found comfort in the song. The bullied children who discovered they weren't alone. The parents struggling with poverty who heard their story validated. The teachers who used the song to start conversations about empathy and kindness. Dolly herself has called it her favorite song she's ever written. Not because it was her biggest hit, not because it won the most awards, but because it captures something essential about who she is and what she believes. It teaches about bullying, about love, about acceptance, about good parents, she has said. At Dollywood, Dolly's theme park in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, just miles from where she grew up, there's a special place dedicated to Coat of Many Colors. In the Chasing Rainbows Museum, you can see a replica of the coat that Dolly's mother made for display. Next to it hangs Porter Wagoner's framed dry cleaning receipt with the original lyrics scrolled on the back. Behind the coat is an almost life-size photograph of children looking directly at the camera, laughing, placing the viewer in the position of being teased, of being the target of mockery. Adjacent to this is a panel with the text of the song. It's a thoughtfully designed space, one that invites visitors to experience not just the song, but its message. To understand that pain can be transformed into art. That shame can be alchemized into pride. That poverty of means doesn't equal poverty of spirit. There's also a replica of Dolly's childhood cabin at Dollywood, complete with original family treasures. It's a humble structure, a reminder of how far she's come, but also a testament to her refusal to forget where she came from. The impact of Coat of Many Colors extends far beyond country music. Taylor Swift has cited Dolly as a major influence, particularly her ability to craft deeply personal songs that resonate universally. When you listen to Swift's confessional songwriting, tracks like You're on Your Own, Kid, you can hear echoes of Dolly's autobiographical approach. Casey Musgraves, Maren Morris, Brandi Carlile, a generation of female country artists have followed the path Dolly cleared, writing unflinchingly about their own experiences, refusing to be boxed in by industry expectations. But the influence isn't limited to country. Artists across genres have recognized what Dolly accomplished with Coat of Many Colors. The alchemy of turning personal trauma into art that heals not just the artist, but the audience. The song proved that you don't have to hide your origins to be successful. That authenticity resonates more deeply than any carefully constructed image. That vulnerability is strength. More than 50 years have passed since Coat of Many Colors was released. Dolly Parton is now in her late 70s, a living legend who has transcended music to become a cultural icon, businesswoman, and philanthropist. She's written over 3,000 songs. She's won 7 Grammy Awards, 10 Country Music Association Awards, and countless other honors. She's acted in movies, starred on Broadway, built a business empire. Her imagination library has given away over 150 million free books to children worldwide. But if you ask her about her favorite song, the one that matters most, she'll tell you it's still Coat of Many Colors. Because that song isn't just about a coat. It's about a philosophy, a way of seeing the world that has guided her entire life. It's about understanding that wealth has nothing to do with money. That love sewn into fabric with a mother's hands is worth more than any designer garment. That dignity and self-worth come from within, not from what others think of you. It's about taking the worst moment of your childhood, the humiliation, the mockery, the shame, and transforming it into something beautiful, something that teaches, something that heals. The original coat is long gone, used for various purposes over the years. But Dolly's mother made a new one for the museum, a tangible reminder of that philosophy made manifest. And every time someone listens to the song, every time a bullied child finds comfort in its message, every time a struggling family hears their story reflected in those 3 minutes of music, that coat lives again. Dolly Parton took a box of rags and turned it into country music's most enduring story of dignity, resilience, and pride. She proved that poverty doesn't have to be permanent, that shame doesn't have to be defining, that love is the richest currency of all. This has been the Sound Vault. Every album has a story. And some stories, like the one about a little girl and her coat of many colors, never get old.